Okay, thank you for joining us this morning for SEB's Virtual Science Cafe, Unwelcome Visitors, Pests in the Urban Environment. It's our first Science Cafe of 2022. My name is Brian McGonigal. I'm the Manager of Alumni Community Engagement at the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences and the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station. Before we get started, just a couple things I want to go over. The event is being recorded and we will post this online subsequent to the event, so you can view it online. You can enter any questions you have for Dr. Wang in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can enter them anytime during his presentation, and after he's done with his presentation, we will answer them in order with time allowable. And that's all I have. So with that, I will direct this over to Mary Nucci. Dr. Nucci is professor in human ecology here at SEBS, and she's also the director of the Science Cafe program. Mary, take it away.
Thank you, Brian. And I'd like to echo Brian's welcome to everyone to the Science Cafes for 2022. And just very briefly, let's move on to our introduction to today's speaker is Dr. Changlu Wang, who is a professor in the Department of Entomology here at Rutgers. And his research focuses on developing ways to improve urban pest management through the study of biology, behavior, and ecology of urban pests. And his talk today will be about his research. So Dr. Wang, I will turn it over to you, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Let me go to the first slide. So today, I'd like to share with you about some information about pests in the urban environment. I study urban entomology. It actually includes both insects and some other non-insect pests, including like spiders and rodents. So today's topic mainly refers to those insects or non-insect pests that occur in the urban environment. So this picture shows actually a bunch of different insects, which is the most abundant organisms on the planet. There are more than 1 million species of insects identified. There may be 2 or 3 more millions that are unidentified. Among them, some of them can be nuisances because they occur in unwanted locations, such as on the food, in the office, in the restaurants, or on our face, like the face fly. There are also some pests that can cause damage to the environment, to our urban homes, or they can contaminate the food or cause asthma and allergy, such as the German cockroach or American cockroach. They are very common in homes, restaurants. There are also rodents, which are serious pests in homes. House mouse is the dominant indoor pest in the homes. It can leave feces, urine, which contain allergens that can cause asthma and allergy. Recently, there are also a resurgence of bedbugs in the US and also in many parts of the world. Bedbug bites, they can cause pain, itchiness, and they can also cause allergic reaction. Like on the right side picture shows the rashes on the back. This was actually me. I was trying to feed the bedbugs in the laboratory. Just about 30 minutes, I got a whole body reaction from the bedbug bites. So I had to go to the emergency room to take some drugs in order to get these rashes down. Besides rashes, I also had blurred eyes, sweating, and fatigue after this kind of reaction. So somebody can get an allergic reaction after repeated exposure to bedbug bites. You probably also know that termites can cause significant damage to homes. Actually, termite damage is the most costly expenses to homes. A typical treatment would cost from $1,000 to $2,000 for average home. Some homes may even you need more than $2,000 in order to treat an infestation. The termite damage can cause either structural, like main damage from like the doors, windows, stars, foundation, etc. But also they can also damage the trees in some like tropical, subtropical regions. In 2018, we surveyed 4 cities in low-income communities. We want to understand what's the prevalence of the urban pests in these communities. So these included the Trenton, Patterson, Jersey City, and Linden. We laid monitors and also conducted the interviews to the residents. And among them, we found the most common pest is cockroach. So 37% of the apartments had the cockroaches. Then the second most common pest is rodents. 20% had the mouse infestations. The third common pest is the bedbug. 9% of them had the bedbugs. So these infestation rates, you can see very high compared to the general society, because the low-income communities tend to live in crowded environments and also lack of funding. Many reasons cause the high infestation rate. There are also a changing environments which affects the pest abundance in the urban environment. One example is the German cockroach. So when I came to the United States in 1995, the first thing I found is the US has a lot of cockroaches, because I never see cockroaches before I came here. The reason is that back in China before the 1995, usually in the winter, the indoor temperature is very cold, so German cockroach cannot survive. But now the German cockroach is also the most common indoor pest in China and also in many developing countries. So German cockroach is a worldwide distributed species. It survives in warm indoor environment. So anywhere if you have a good heating system, you tend to have German cockroach infestations. The economic activities also tend to spread new pests from one region to another. For instance, the brown marmorated stink bug now occurs in all over the US except 2 states in Wyoming and South Dakota. The red areas indicate where this pest become a serious agriculture pest. In New Jersey, this pest is also an urban pest because they tend to overwinter in homes, in attics, or in basements, or just indoor environments. So it's become a nuisance not only to the agriculture setting, but also to the urban setting. Another pest that you probably have heard is the Spotted Lanternfly. It's actually a beautiful insect, I think, but it's a nuisance and also it's a pest to the agriculture arena. Why? Because the adults and the nymphs, they feed on the saps of plants. They can reduce the yield of fruits. They can also actually produce the honeydews that make it attractive to other insects and cause fungus growth or just cause inconvenience. This picture was taken beside the Foreign Hall in Cook campus in 2021. So this was beside the disc golf course. When people play the disc golf, they are annoyed by these pests. So one gentleman trying to use the swappers to kill these flies, but they actually outgrow the effort. So it's really difficult to get rid of them. I'm sure that these spotted lanternflies will continue to expand and also proliferate in the urban environment and become a serious pest. When people found these pests, they tend to use insecticides. If you go to a convenience store, you probably notice there are always those aerosol cans that are specified for killing insects. This picture shows all different kinds of pesticides that are in a Lowe's store. So in these stores, you tend to get more varieties of different pesticides. So, they vary in the formulation, active ingredients, and also price, etc. So how you can choose which one works the best? So most people do not know what kind of pesticides should be used to control pests. So these pictures were taken in apartments where people try to use different chemicals to treat bed bugs. But unfortunately, among these products, none of them works very well. The reason is that the field bedbug populations became resistant to these pesticides. Also, some pesticides just are not effective. For instance, these essential oil products and this one, they really are not effective, even to the lab strains of bedbugs. We also found that many people use insect repellers or pest repellers for repelling, spiders, cockroaches, rodents, etc. But there are no studies showing they are effective. They are completely waste of money. But still, many people use these repellers. You can find them easily in stores. So never use repellers. Insect foggers or total release foggers also are available in stores. They are labeled for controlling bedbugs, fleas, cockroaches, etc. And there are no studies showing they are effective. In fact, when you apply these foggers in your home, you contaminate your environment because the fog will land on the counters, in the cabinets, and all exposed surfaces. So it's really not a good method trying to control these, bedbugs or cockroaches using these pesticides. So how do you manage those pests in the urban environments? So we always say, try to use integrated pest management or IPM. So IPM basically consists prevention, monitoring, and then control. So prevention usually involves sanitation, decluttering, exclusion. For monitoring, you can use traps or use visual inspection. When you try to control these pests, always try non-chemical methods first, then try insecticides only when necessary. So that's the goal of the IPM. Here, I just want to show you an example how we can use IPM to control cockroaches in apartment buildings. Say, suppose you manage a building, either office building or apartment building, how you can get rid of cockroaches. So first, we would do a building-wide cockroach survey. Basically, we lay the traps in the cabinets, under the sink, beside the stove, beside the refrigerator, and also beside the toilet. Because these are the 4 most common places you would find cockroaches. Because cockroaches like to be close to the food or water sources. Then after 2 weeks, we would go back and check the traps to determine if cockroaches are present and also the density. Here you can see a set of 4 traps that we collected from one apartment. Obviously, this is a very heavily infested apartment. You can see hundreds of cockroaches in these 4 traps. And the most numbers were found near the refrigerator. So this is where actually most of the cockroaches would exist. The second most common place is the stove. So this is where actually you want to focus your inspection or treatment because cockroaches tend to hide near these areas. We also educate the residents on how to do the proper housekeeping in order to reduce cockroach numbers. In general, we found that sanitation is related to the presence of cockroaches. So poor sanitation, usually you have many roaches. Good sanitation usually wouldn't have any cockroach issues. But still, some clean apartments can have a few cockroaches. Based on the survey, we mapped the distribution of the cockroaches in the building. The different colors represent the different levels of infestation. From this diagram, you can clearly see that the infestations are clustered, which means when an apartment is infested, its neighboring apartments tend to also be infested. This is because the cockroaches can easily disperse between neighbors through the ceilings, floors, or through the common walls. So this is actually very common in apartment buildings because the cockroaches can spread easily among neighbors. This is one reason why the apartment buildings tend to have cockroach infestations. Once we found those infestations, we applied the gel bait to the cabinets. We applied at least 4 spots in each cabinet. Depends on the level, we may apply 4 spots so that all the baits were basically located near where the cockroaches hide. Then we did the retreatment every month for a 12-month period. At the end of 12 months, we found that the infestation rate decreased from 49% to 12%. We also sampled the floor dust to determine the cockroach allergen levels and the insecticide residue levels. So G1 is one of the cockroach allergen that are produced by cockroaches. We found that the concentration reduced by 96%. Among the insecticide residues we detected, we found that the overall concentration decreased by 74%. So by doing IPM, you can see you can significantly reduce the cockroach numbers, but also the allergen levels and the insecticide residue levels. This is because people stopped using insecticide sprays. Also, the cockroach allergen will degrade over time. So you don't have new allergens coming in, then you overall the allergen level will reduce over time. But for most single homes, the most common insects that are found in homes, we call the occasional invaders. Occasional invaders are those that temporarily live in homes. They cannot finish their life cycle in the home. So this picture shows the sticky trap that in my basement. I collected this about 2 weeks ago. So this was during about a 2 months period. So you can see many ground beetles, some spiders, and moths, and centipede, millipedes. So these are the common arthropods that you would find in single homes. This is in New Jersey. So why we have so many different arthropods in homes? Because our homes tend to be surrounded by all kinds of habitats, different insects. So how you can prevent them to come into your home? The first thing you may want to do is sanitation. Remove leaves, debris, branches, etc. around the basement, windows, walls, windows, etc. And then you want to avoid the over mulch. So people tend to put a lot of mulch beside the foundation. This looks nice, looks beautiful, but the mulch is a perfect habitat for termites to live. If you have a mulch, you tend to have termites, also ants and fungus and some other insects. If you tend to use mulch, try to use 1-inch mulch or use rubber mulch. Best yet, use rock, not the wood mulch. And if you have grass, do not plant the grass all the way to the foundation. Instead, leave 1 foot or wider strip of rocks. The rocks will prevent or at least deter the presence of mites, beetles, spiders, etc. around foundation. So you are less likely to have spiders or beetles, etc. in your homes. So this is what we recommend from pest prevention perspective. But unfortunately, most people want mulch or shrubs or flowers, which looks beautiful, but not good for pest prevention purpose. Another thing you want to do is that always try to seal all the cracks, crevices at the foundation, on the walls, because this is where the ants, spiders, rodents, wasps may enter into the walls or into the homes. And we found that sometimes the wasps can actually build a nest inside the walls. So sealing these cracks is very useful for preventing the pests. For rodent proofing, it is especially important because that rodents can cause serious damage to the structure or to your food. So you want to check carefully all the cracks, crevices around the pipes, both on the exterior walls and also inside, like cabinets, foundation, etc. So prevent the rodents coming into the home is extremely important. Install door sweeps under the exterior doors. Garage doors also is very important because rodents can go to the garage and then they can cause damage to cars. In the winter time, if you park your car in the garage for a long time without using, many times that you can get damage from rodents because they tend to build a nest in your car. So for outside, you may also want to reduce the vegetation. For instance, here, this picture shows that the rocks were placed around the foundation and all the shrubs, vegetation were taken out. So whenever you have shrubs or ground covers, then rodents may appear in those locations. So for rodent prevention, it's better to use rocks rather than the wood mulch or some vegetation so that you reduce the probability of rodents invading your home. At the end, here are some fact sheets you can find in the website. If you search, home, garden, fact sheets, you can find different fact sheets about the urban pest. So I basically study urban pest prevention, control. I do lab and field studies. We also go to apartment buildings, communities to educate people how to prevent pests. So if you like to, know about different pests, you can send me email, which is, I'm not sure if you can see, Changlu w@rutgers.edu. And also my phone number, 848-932-9552. And you can write me email or call me. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Changlu.
Yeah.
I'll also share your email in the follow-up thank you email we send to attendees.
Okay.
Thank you. So we do have several questions. Somebody asked, are only German cockroaches seen in apartments?
Oh, okay. So in New Jersey, when we did the survey, we found 98% of the infestation are German cockroach. Then about 1% is American cockroach. Another 1% is the Oriental cockroach. This is in New Jersey.
Okay.
So in southern US, you have different species, like a brown banded cockroach, smoky brown cockroach, and other species in other parts.
Okay. All right. Does the rock barrier also help with ants?
Yes, definitely. So in New Jersey, at least, odorous house ants commonly hide or nest in mulch. So if you have rocks, you tend to have less likely have the odorous house ants. But also be careful that if you have a hollow space under the rock, the ants may also tend to build a nest in the hollow space. So you want the rocks not to be too big. Otherwise, the ants can, build a nest over there.
Okay. Is it a problem to have beneficial insects like millipedes and centipedes? Seems like it would be better to allow a few if they are only occasional than to kill them.
All right. So I know centipedes are predatory, so they eat other insects. It's beneficial, but the millipedes are not beneficial. So you don't want millipedes. They can have some smells. Well, millipedes, centipedes both like moist places, such as the bathroom, the sink, the tub, and also washing machine area, basement area. So you want to seal your basement windows, the foundation very well, so that they're less likely to invade your home. Also, you may want to try to reduce your relative humidity in the basement to below 45. This way you also can minimize the occurrence of millipedes, centipedes, and many other insects.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the water bug or Oriental cockroach?
Oh, okay. So Oriental cockroach is common outside, but not inside. In summer times, they can occur in garage or in homes because they, try to go into the building. Normally, it's not issue, but in summer times, it can be issue. So you may want to check around the building if there are any areas tend to have Oriental cockroaches. Then if they always appear in some locations, you may want to apply some bait to kill the cockroaches. But generally, it's not a very serious issue in New Jersey.
Okay. Someone asked, in New Jersey, are cockroaches found outdoors, like in the woods or forests?
Depends on the species. So German cockroaches always occur indoors, not outdoors. Outside in New Jersey, there are some what we call the wood cockroaches. So the wood cockroaches are attracted to lights. So if you have lights on the porch, you tend to have some cockroaches, attracted to the light, but only in the summertime. And they usually not if they go into homes, they cannot survive, so they usually die. I think there is a relatively new species in New Jersey. It's called the Mediterranean cockroach. It's very similar to German cockroach. It's an invasive species. It's an introduced species from Europe, but now it's more common in New Jersey.
Is there any way to forever eradicate pests without damaging the environment?
Probably not. The reason is, the insect diversity is really high outside. You always have something outside. No matter how clean the environment is, you always have something outside. Because our building, either home or the institution buildings, they actually are attracted to a number of organisms because either the surface or the temperature or smell, from the home, they attract the insects. For instance, in winter times, you always have some overwintering insects trying to go to the home. You cannot prevent them going home. As long as you have a building, some insects will try to go to the building because the building is warm. Rodents, especially, they tend to invade buildings because buildings provide protection. So rodents, they are prey animals. So many natural enemies can kill rodents. So they want to find a building so that they can hide. That's why house mouse is very common indoors. Like ants, also, they are so common outdoors. You can never really eliminate all the ants. So there are so many organisms outside. So we have to try to live with them and appreciate them because they are part of our ecosystem. We just have to live with them.
Understood. So you talked a little bit about infestations in apartment buildings. So it seems like individual family control of an apartment seems useless unless all the apartments do the same treatment. Do you feel that pest management should be made the responsibility of landlords or a policy by local government?
Absolutely true. So I think according to the laws in all the states, the landlord or the property owner is responsible for pest control in rental units, like buildings. So if you rent the building and rent the apartments to somebody, the landlords are responsible for pest control, simply because the pests can come from neighbors, can come from the common areas. For instance, the garbage disposal room, the community room, the basement, the washing machine area. Those areas can have pests. And even your apartment is very clean, you don't know your neighbors. So one day maybe your neighbor sprayed the chemical, then the spray is very repellent. So the cockroaches then spread to your home, to your apartment. It's very common. That's why we always suggest that for property managers, they should consider doing building-wide pest control, or at least building-wide monitoring to identify which apartment has pests, and then they can treat immediately so that they will not spread to neighbors. But unfortunately, building-wide treatment or monitoring is not very commonly done. And that's why that many low-income communities have chronic infestations. I showed that 37% of the apartments have cockroaches. So that's very high. Why? It's just because the roaches basically spread between apartments. So you get rid of some apartments, but the other apartments become infested again. So you always have roaches.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about how pests develop resistance to treatments such as pesticides?
Right. So in a pest population, generally some individuals have some genes that are resistant to the chemical. So when you repeat the treatments, then the resistant individuals become more and more common. So all the susceptible ones died. So then the population become resistant. So now you have to either change to insecticide that with different mode of action, or you use a combination of non-chemical and chemical methods. That's why we always recommend using IPM or try to use the non-chemical methods first, because using sprays or using chemicals tend to cause resistance. That's very common in bedbugs, cockroaches, and also rodents.
Okay. Can you talk about carpet beetles and best prevention and ways to eliminate them?
Oh, I have a fact sheet on the web. So to prevent them, basically you want to vacuum the floor very often. You want to seal your expensive clothing, especially the wool clothing, in airtight bags. So because carpet beetle tend to infest those wool clothing or leather materials. Keep the moisture low will also help. Then routinely check your clothing. So carpet beetles tend to infest items that are dirty, that are not used for a long time, and also that in relatively maybe high temperature areas. So I know some people maybe try to say either store the expensive clothing that in sealed bags or in like a low temperature areas. Something that you can discourage the development of the carpet beetles.
Okay. Does the type of soil affect the kinds or amounts of pests that might be seen?
Not really. I think it's not the soil type, it's the moisture. So more moisture in the soil, you tend to have more insects. especially termites. So you definitely want your foundation to be dry, because when you have a wet foundation, what happens is termites will be relatively more easily come to your home. Secondly, you have all kinds of moisture loving insects or arthropods, such as the millipedes, centipedes, soul bugs, springtails. Those all, they like moisture, around homes. So try to, especially like you have downspouts, right? If you have clogged gutters, if you have like a low grade around foundation, always try to correct that so that your foundation area is dry. So that's actually most important, I think, to prevent those insect problems.
One person wrote, I have cave crickets in my basement. Are they considered pests? Are pests just those arthropods that affect us with allergies and etc.? Or are all arthropods in the home pests?
Okay, so right now we know that dust mites, cockroach, rodents, they produce allergens. Mole crickets, no study found that they can produce allergens. But the mole crickets or camel crickets, they are considered pests because they occur in homes. The camel crickets or mole crickets, same thing. So they occur in homes because it's moist. Usually it's in the basement, near the sink, or because somewhere you have leaked pipes or condensation. So if you have mole crickets, then one way you can do is that you put a bunch of traps around the perimeters of the foundation, so you know where you can find the mole crickets. If you want to eliminate them, then you have to basically reduce moisture, or if still you have a lot of numbers, maybe you can apply some insecticide dust along the foundation, along the floors. My home always have camel crickets, I know, because I put those blue balls in my home. I always found beetles and camel crickets, but they are not in huge numbers, so I don't worry about it. Actually, I found more beetles than camel crickets. Beetles are much more common in basements.
Have pests increased due to our behaviors, or have they always been present and we are just less welcoming as we see people less likely to appreciate arthropods and rodents?
Right. So I also mentioned that as the urbanization process continues and people's living standards increases, so then more and more people become, more sensitive to the insects. So previously they may think it's not an issue, but now they more likely think it is an issue because they want higher sanitation standards. So people's attitudes certainly change. But I also want to say that the changing environment can also affect the abundance of insects. For instance, so if you live in a rural area or close to wooded area, you're more likely to have nuisance pests than live in the city. Reason is that, say, if you have a lot of trees, shrubs around, so those trees, shrubs, they have insects, either like aphids or like leafhoppers. They like lights, so they are attracted to the lights. So during the night or during the winter, your home will attract those insects. So that's why that basically the more diverse the environment is, the more likely you have all kinds of nuisance insects in your home. So you try to basically seal your home very well so that the insects will not invade your home through the windows, through the doors, through the holes, through the attic, etc. So do like a rodent proofing your house or seal the cracks, crevices. It is really important for everybody. So as long as you have a home, always try to do these things so that you have less issues in your home.
Right. Just a reminder, people, we still have some time. If you'd like to ask your questions, just enter them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Another question. How can we prevent and eradicate mealybugs, scales, and gnats on houseplants? Do you have any recommendations for that?
Oh, okay. So there are 3 different things. For gnats, we also call them fungus gnats. So fungus gnats basically occur in like a pile of grass clippings, in rotten vegetables, in flower pots. So if you have a lot of flower pots in your home, you always have those fungus gnats. The reason is the larvae live in the soil, live in the potting soil. They feed on the organic materials. Then when they become pupae, fly, then they appear in homes. So how you prevent? First, so if you plant a new flower, use the clean soil, right? Clean soil means sterilized. So if the soil already have the larvae, then you have the issue. Secondly is that when you water the plants, try not to very often. So you want to wait until the surface is completely dry before you water again. That's another thing. And a third method is that on top of the soil, you can place a layer of sand so that the top is always dry. That also discourages the fungus gnats to lay eggs in the flower pots. And lastly, remember that the fungus gnats can also occur from outside. So there are a lot of fungus gnats outside. So you want to seal your windows, doors well so that they are not attracted to inside, right? So because they are always outside, you cannot kill all of them from outside. So basically, you want to do different things in order to reduce the fungus gnat numbers. For mealybugs and aphids, so aphids tend to, well, depends on the plants. So certain plants are more susceptible to aphids and mealybugs than others. That's one thing. I also found that in winter times, you sometimes more likely to have aphids because the plants grow better outside when there are strong sunlight. But when you move them to the inside, they tend to have aphids and mealybugs. How you control them? I remember that there are different ways you can control. You can use the soapy water to clean them off from the leaves if there are not many aphids or mealybugs. But if you have so many, you can consider using like a neem oil. Neem oil is a plant-based treatment. You can control the aphids and the mealybugs. If it's still not effective, you may try some over-the-counter products that are labeled for aphids and mealybugs. Just remember that whenever you spray, I would suggest that you may put a newspaper at the bottom so that the droplets, the residues will not land on the floor in your home, so that just avoid the contamination. So anyway, you try to use a combination of different methods. If one doesn't work, try another one. Always try to non-chemical methods first, then use chemicals. And when you choose chemicals, check the active ingredients. So plant-based material generally is safer, but also tend to be less effective. You have to choose which is more important, which is more effective.
What is your favorite insect to study and why?
I like to study ants. Ants, I think that they are really smart. They are so diverse. It's really interesting to observe their behavior. they have all kinds of behaviors. One of them is called a slave making. They can capture the pupae from other ants' nest, bring to their nest, and then rear them as slaves, so that when the pupae hatch, become workers, they work for the slave maker. So that's very interesting. There are also some we call the mound building ants. So each mound can have tens of thousands of ants. So they are really fascinating insects.
We were introduced to the spotted lanternfly last year. What's the prognosis for how they're going to affect our area this year and going forward? Is there an idea of how much bigger a problem they're going to become?
First, it will be more widespread. And secondly, the abundance will also be higher. I can clearly see during the last 2 years on Cook campus, the first year I only occasionally see some lanternflies. Then 2021, I see much more, especially around the foreign hall and also around the greenhouse near the agriculture experimentation road. So because there are some tree of heaven, there's some other plants also available. So basically, if you have suitable hosts in your yard or somewhere in the wild, then you would have these lanternflies. So they are spreading very fast, very steady. So I think you will encounter much more in the future. So which is unfortunate because they produce a lot of honeydews.
Another question. What do you think is the most dangerous insect in New Jersey?
The most dangerous insect?
Yes.
You mean to the agriculture, to human?
I think in general.
In general.
If there are different ones that are dangerous in different ways, could you discuss that a little bit?
Ticks, well, they're not insects. I think ticks are very important because Lyme disease is very prevalent in Northeast. So New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, all have a lot of ticks and Lyme disease. So you definitely need to be careful. Mosquitoes always are annoying, but in the past, we know that they transmitted the West Nile virus. Still is present, but not a very, high rate. So mosquitoes, I would say, are still dangerous. It's just not as common. Like the mosquito transmitted disease is not as common as tick transmitted disease. So in the US, ticks transmit the most diseases than any other arthropods. So that's why I think ticks are dangerous. Tick bites also is painful.
I think we got one more. You had mentioned that centipedes are somewhat beneficial because they eat insects. Are there any actual benefits to any of these pests?
Beneficial in terms of the location, the situation. So millipedes, centipedes, for instance, garden centipedes, I think is beneficial. They just feed on other insects. Otherwise, well, they can also be the food for other insects too, or other animals. Remember, there are a lot of animals that rely on insects as a food. So they are ecologically, I think all insects, not all, maybe most insects are useful. There is a useful space for them to be there. They exist because there is a reason. So they either become food for others or they can they can eat other insects. So I think, for us to keep a healthy environment, I think conserve insects is our duty, and we should be aware that only very small number of insects become pests. Majority of them are ecologically important. I would say this. I don't know if people notice that overall the insect diversity or the number of insect species decreased a lot over the years. So every year we still lose many species. Many of them we still don't know their name. They just extinguished forever because deforestation, urbanization will destroy their habitats, and the insects will disappear. So that's unfortunate.
Another question. Somebody remarked, I saw very few monarch butterflies last year. Did you happen to notice? And what are your thoughts on the monarch population decline?
That's because the reduction in the habitats. So that's why, people try to plant more milkways along their, migration routes. So the more hosts to the larvae, then more likely you would have a healthy, population size. But, urbanization, construction kills a lot of, eliminate a lot of the hosts. That's why that we want to conserve the natural environment so that you can encourage, those different things, the different insects to occur in the environment. Monaco butterfly is just one example because it's so distinct, so popular. Many people know them. So their numbers are down because of the lack of milkways. There are also many other insects. Bees, for example. The wild bee population also is down because we don't have many wildflowers anymore. So.
Okay. Well, it looks like that's it for the questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Wang, for your presentation today. And thank you all for joining us. Mary, did you have any last words, anything to say?
Sure. I've learned a lot today, and I'm already thinking about taking care of around my property. So thank you, Dr. Wang. Really great presentation. And as you know, his email is still up on the screen. So if you have any other questions, he's offered for you to reach out to him.